Welcome to Cinemaphile, where we showcase the best in independent documentary and foreign filmmakers and talk to them about their work. I'm your host, Mike Kaspar. You can listen to other interviews by going to Cinemaphile with Mike Kaspar at Spotify. Chase Strangio battles at the Supreme Court for transgender adolescent access to gender-affirming health care, confronting not only the legal system, but also a media landscape that distorts public perception and threatens the struggle for trans rights. We're joined today by the producer as well as the director of this wonderful documentary film called Heightened, Scrutiny, the producer Amy Scholder, as well as the director Sam Fader. To both of you, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much, Mike. It's really an honor to be here.
I'm glad that the film focuses on a multiple fronts, if you will, in terms of the fight for trans rights. Not only the very personal story of Chase, but also the media landscape, as I mentioned in the introduction, which is vitally important to people's perception, understanding of what's going on, and helps people gain civil rights. But as opposed to the media landscape, it's been an impediment. But Sam, I'll start with you. Where were you in your work as a filmmaker when this project came to you? What inspired you to move forward with this?
Yeah, it was really coming off our last film, Disclosure, about a year. I mean, the whole reason we made Disclosure was to kind of, as a warning story that this backlash is coming. We didn't know at the time what it would look like. Certainly didn't imagine it to be as horrible as it is. But that's why we made Disclosure. And about a year after Disclosure came out, we started to see a shift in the landscape of the media. And I noticed some of it, but I didn't understand at that time the direct repercussions of the way the media had was perpetuating these very distorted narratives, these very untrue ideas about what it meant to be trans in the world. But it was about a year later, I was working on a TV show, and there was someone on crew who struck up a conversation with me. And, it was a queer and very trans TV show. And this person knew who I was and knew the work I made. And they just started talking to me about how, they're an ally. They love queer people. They love trans people, neither of which they are. But they just didn't feel great about like kids. Yeah, how could kids know their gender? The parents are being pressured. They were just repeating line after line what I had once heard only come from like white wing thinkers. And so I just very quickly realized that she was parroting what she had read in mainstream media, in the New York Times, in the Atlantic, et cetera. And as I started to dig into that, I started to realize how powerful these narratives were in shifting public opinion, to so much so that these articles were being cited in legislation that was, for anti-trans bills. And so that was terrifying to me. It was terrifying to me that the mainstream media had that type of power in this moment, because I'm not sure that's often the case that legal briefs cite mainstream media. According, lawyers I've spoken to say that is not common practice. But it just upset me that they were turning on us, essentially. That was just terrifying, because the people who read those magazines or those newspapers, kind of consider themselves, quote unquote, to be liberal. And now they are becoming more and more skeptical of trans people being part of society, being in public space. What is good for our health medically or not, when they were really uninformed. So that's really where this film started, of how do we speak to those people who are now believing basically this mythology that the paper of record, is perpetuating.
Yeah.
So that was really where it started.
Yeah.
And I did just a lot of interviews and a lot of research with journalists, just sort of about what's wrong with these articles. Why is exactly like, what is wrong with the framing? What is wrong with, and I just learned all about what's like, what do the readers actually read? What is the takeaway, and what are the repercussions? And that's where it started.
Amy Scholder, where did you come into the project? How did you get involved?
So I was Sam's producer for Disclosure, and we it took us 4 years to make that film. It was very hard to fund it at that time because really people outside of the trans community didn't think that a film about transgender representation was going to be of interest to a wide audience, but it turned out it was. Film premiered at Sundance and was acquired by Netflix. And it was a very gratifying experience to see the rollout of that film and the kind of impact that it had, which was to get people to think about how Hollywood had been telling people what to think about trans people and really told trans people what to think about trans people by the storytelling that had been so age old in film and television. That film ends, as Sam was saying, with this warning that if you have this increased visibility, there will be surely backlash for a marginalized community. And after the film came out, we were in lockdown. It was COVID. I was very isolated, disturbed by what was going on in the world. And when Sam came to me with this follow-up to disclosure and said, look, what we thought was going to happen is happening. There's this backlash, and I think I have an idea of what's really leading, or what is really a main way to speak of this backlash and how we're losing allies every day. And that is to look at how mainstream media has gone from celebrating trans people in their papers and making it a kind of human interest story that there are more and more trans people, and some of them are famous, went from that to a kind of coverage that was about debating whether trans adolescents really understood who they are and deserve health care at that stage in their lives, and questioning decades longs of medical protocols and psychological protocols. And so when Sam was bringing this with an idea about how to make a film about it, I came out of my isolation and said, absolutely. I don't know what else could be more important than to work on this project.
For our audience, for anyone listening to our conversation, I want to let them know that disclosure is in so many ways revelatory, informative, but celebratory as well. That's the thing that I came away from watching Disclosure. It's a celebration. It's something putting all of this in a very positive frame with all the dangers for the people who are coming out or who are manifesting as trans, and just all the things about it. But it was a wonderful film. Congratulations on your work there. How do you? I mean, this is a film. This is a film that is a building block in an attempt to educate the public. But man, this is a steep hill. And I mean, it's seeing that we're also in a period of regression in terms of our civil rights, a retrenchment, if you will. Taking rights away has become something that seems more and more likely for a lot of different people in this country. So I guess, Sam, in addition, I want to talk about Chase and the struggle and the case and getting to know him. But how do you start to, other than what you're doing, what does it look like to begin to kind of push back in a way that's going to matter politically? I know that's a big question, I realize.
It's a big question. I think what it looks like is many different things, right? I think there's people doing the cultural work that, Amy and I are trying to do. I know there are people who are, on the ground fighting every day, whether it's lawyers or medical professionals, educators. I mean, we are working on an impact campaign right now, where we're partnering with people in various states, particularly states that have the most pressing bills coming up, and working with them to see how screening the film with them and then talking about how can this film help them with their work. And out of some of those conversations, lawyers are using clips in court. And so I think creating the tools for then the people doing the direct action is the job of cultural culture makers right now. Um, and so I think it's, Chase is probably, battling, constantly, he's
Yeah.
probably fighting in court all the time, as are many, many, many other attorneys. But I mean, it's scary. I mean, there's no way around that. I mean, on the big level, it's just being the target of
Yeah.
such animus, and such legal uh, weaponizing of the legal system. I mean, I think just yesterday it was shown that the DOJ is like investigating doctors who are, providing healthcare. And some of my friends are those doctors and practitioners and, physicians assistants. And it's just they're getting investigated. They're going to be criminalized, right? Like that does not end. There's no way that that ends well. And so, and of course, as parents as well, like parents are being accused of child abuse. So this is scary. And there are people who are ready to dig in and fight, and there are people who are moving. And I understand why they would move out of the country, for these reasons. It's bleak, but I think what we're trying to do is, just bite size, like I said, going to state by state and organizing with people, and pushing back as much as we can, because we do have a lot of allies. We do have a lot of people who love us and care about us and want to do the right thing. Not all of them have the tools or the information. And so that's
Right.
what we hope to be providing them with.
Right. Sorry to drag you down that path because it does look grim. I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. I know you already realize just the extent of it, but I do want to let people know that they can see this wonderful documentary, Heightened Scrutiny, and that is at the DC TV Firehouse. That begins on July 18th, runs through the 24th. It'll also be out here in Los Angeles at the Laemmle Theaters, a couple of them. I think NoHo, Monica's Film Center, and one other one, Encino, I believe, Town Center. No,
Glendale.
Glendale.
Glendale. And that's beginning the 26th through the 27th and also on the 29th. So there's a link at the Film School Radio website. You could go to the site for the film, heightenedscrutinydoc.com to find out more. And yeah, I again, there is progress being made. I love the people that you have in the film that are talking. Jelani Cobb is I'm a big fan of his from way back, and to see him and other people in the film who are essentially making the case on a lot of levels, intellectually, legally, and also at a very personal level. And I think it's very effective kind of trifecta of of bringing the audience in. Amy, congratulations to both of you on your work here on doing that. But let's talk about the people that are in the film. Laverne Cox, there's many people in the film that are just wonderful. Let's talk about that.
Well, Sam does an incredible job of bringing people together to tell their stories and share their expertise from their own lives, so that there's not a sense of there being one expert, or that an expert is um, uh, outside of community. And I loved that about Disclosure, was
Yeah,
that, there was not a trans perspective, that there were 32 or 34 people speaking from their own experience. And similarly, in our interviews, we have all these journalists and activists who are really talking about how and why they have covered trans issues, or if they have been trans journalists, how they've been shut out of newsrooms in very particular ways. So, we were so thrilled that Jelani Cobb came on set to talk about, his perspective about covering different communities in journalism, and then also and a kind of history of activism in journalism, and also his own connection to why he would
yeah.
write about trans issues. And we
Amy, real quick, there was a woman who I thought there's a lot of very effective speakers in the film, but the one who talked about this in relation to the Loving case, I thought she was so trenchant in her perspective on that. I just there were many people. I don't, I'm just singling out a
Yeah,
couple here.
Lydia Polgreen is
Yeah.
a opinion writer for the New York Times,
Okay.
and she has, such an important perspective on the connections between marginalized groups in
Yeah.
our culture, and I think spoke to the fact that what is happening to the trans community is just the beginning and deeply connected to what's happening to bodily autonomy rights across the board.
Across
And,
the board.
and so the need for coalition building and to resist the right wing's attempt to divide and rule, which they have been very successful doing by just kind of taking the trans community out and
Yeah.
singling them out, and and the fact that the mainstream media hasn't identified this as symptomatic of much larger problem.
Well, the thing about her perspective that really struck me,
Hmm.
and that is in the way she talked about loving and the decision and the arguments that were being made against interracial marriage was, well, what about the children? And, and that's one of those things that people say about trans rights that kind of leapfrogs your intellect and a lot of your sort of that's bullshit kind of stuff. But you know what I mean? It's really it's a reaction. I think a normal reaction to hear the children are at risk here somehow. So, Sam, I mean, it's yeah. There's a lot of insidious arguments. I'll call them insidious arguments. Sam,
Yeah, the what about the children tactic, to be honest, is very intentional. I think
yeah,
we have heard evidence of a lot of these, right-wing groups, these anti-trans groups, like saying we have to start with the children. And I think we actually have some audio in the film
yeah,
about that.
yeah.
And it is not accidental. They are not concerned about children at all, to be honest. And they just know if you can get people to rally around the children, then you can get rid of all of us. And that is what we literally have that audio of them saying that in the film. And that is so important for people who, again, see themselves as liberal potential allies, except for this one thing, to understand that like these fears you have been manufactured, and they've been manufactured really intentionally so that you to build an argument that trans people shouldn't have any rights of any age. It's very easy to grab on to the children because everyone worries about children, like you're saying. But that has been their plan, is to get people to worry about the children, and then it has a domino effect on all trans people.
Right. And let's make the next leap, which is made in the film, which is, well, adults, if it's bad for children, how can we allow, I mean, if you're going to build this sort of illogical logic into their discussions, into their arguments, what about adults? Why should
Exactly.
they? Yeah. And so this and I'm going to cut this out of the interview, but these people are not around.
No.
They're coming for us. A lot of just they're coming for whoever doesn't agree with them, whoever doesn't look like them. They're coming. And they have I was just in local city, Santa Ana. There are military walking the streets of California cities right now, and these people aren't going anywhere. So the urgency of this film and the issues brought up in this film should affect and should be everyone should be concerned for a lot of reasons. Amy, does that sound right to you? Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, I think that, we've seen this tactic with, Anita Bryant, in the 80s trying to get gay teachers fired, and claiming that they were going to be recruiting young people, and that young people couldn't possibly know their own sexuality. This has been a tactic that's been um, deployed for a very long time. And, uh, there have been trans people, trans adolescents coming out in their families. And when those families show love and care, there have been decades of protocols developed for those families to get medical attention and psychological attention to support their
Yeah.
children and to support their adolescents to into adulthood so that those people can make their own life decisions. And the fact that all of that became subject to debate, and ultimately, in the case of Scrutiny, that Chase Strangio was arguing at the Supreme Court in December, the fact that 6 months later in June, a decision was made by 6 justices that's going to impact the families of trans kids across the country irreparably is insane. I think if you look at it, at face value, those 6 justices made a decision to decide on the medical care um, for families across the country.
And it's very striking to me that people who there's a large mass of people who maybe feel like this doesn't apply to them. This doesn't affect them. There's a lot of horrible things happening in the world. This particular injustice is not for them to worry about. But this case is going to impact everybody. I mean, I think once you start chipping away at anyone's bodily autonomy, you're opening the door to chip away at everyone's bodily autonomy.
That's right. If anyone listening to this, give that some thought. If you can be told what you are allowed to do with your body, what you and who you seek medical care for whatever reason, that you're not allowed to do that. That is a
This,
truly frightening thing.
yeah, this is going to impact everyone's right to privacy, everyone's right to privacy with their practitioners, like everyone's right to privacy with the medicine they need.
Yeah.
And it's going to impact everyone's rights to making decisions over their own bodies. And I just feel like if you don't care about trans people, at least I hope you're caring about yourself. I hope you're
Yeah.
worrying about yourself, because
Yeah.
if we don't coalition build, if we don't continue,
Yeah.
right, to work together, I
Yeah.
mean, it's just that's we are a huge country. It is hard to organize in a lot of ways, but there are so many incredible movements that are building and working. And if we could all connect those movements, then like we'd be in much better shape. But
Yeah. Yeah.
we don't
It's
see enough of that.
it's just so distressing that the media that I rely on that I read because I believe that they're reliable and that they're in there they look behind the curtain, if you will,
Yeah.
is really just now kind of side eye on so many of these things. They're just kind of pretending like they're not seeing it. And that's the thing that's disturbing to me. I'm going to just in the frame of disasters and looking like things are dark. I was told this years ago. I hope it's true, and that is that the Chinese character for crisis is also the character for opportunity. And I want to believe that to be true. And I do think that out of the rubble of the mess that is going to be created by this decision by the Supreme Court, people will finally understand how important all of these issues are for all of us. And I certainly hope that that's the case. And heightened scrutiny is certainly a step in that direction for people who are interested in seeing the film. I urge you to check this out. And again, it's going to be screening in New York at John Alpert's, the wonderful John Alpert DCTV Firehouse Cinema, starting on the 18th through the 24th of July, and then here in Los Angeles at the Laemmle Theaters, and there are a few. We mentioned Monica. What? Go ahead.
No,
You know 'em, Amy.
NoHo,
Okay.
on the 26th, it will be at NoHo,
Okay.
Lemley. On the 27th, we will be at Monica. On the 29th, we'll be at Glendale. And I think we're going to have some additional screenings that we'll be able to
Fantastic.
announce. And then we'll go up to San Francisco to the Roxy.
Fantastic.
That will
Fantastic.
start on the 31st of July.
And you're going to be in town for Q&As for all of
Yeah.
that. And that's fantastic. And also just to get people to the website, which is heightenedscrutinydoc.com, heightenedscrutinydoc.com. Well, to the producer, Amy Scholder, as well as the director, Sam Fader, for the film Heightened Scrutiny. Thank you so very much for your time.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you. You have been listening to Cinemaphile. I'm your host, Mike Kaspar, and you can listen to previous interviews as well as special programming, or you can subscribe by going to Cinemaphile, that's F-I-L-E, with Mike Kaspar, at Spotify. Until next time, thank you for listening.